The legendary TV series MASH, 1972 to 1983, remains one of the most beloved shows in television history, known for its brilliant mix of humor, heartbreak, and humanity. Set in a mobile army surgical hospital during the Korean War, it gave audiences unforgettable characters and powerful storytelling. But beyond the screen, the real lives of the actors often held their own tragedies. In this video, we take a heartfelt look back at the talented stars of MASH who have sadly passed away. Some due to illness, others through unexpected or tragic circumstances. As we remember their incredible performances and lasting impact, we also uncover the often untold stories of their struggles, final moments, and the legacies they left behind. William Christopher was born on October 20th, 1932, in Evanston, Illinois, and took on the role of Father Francis Mulcahy in MASH in 1972 at the age of 40. As the chaplain of the 4077, Mulcahy was soft-spoken, endlessly patient, and deeply spiritual, an emotional compass in a war-torn world. Audiences found solace in his empathy, and the character became an unexpected fan favorite. But Christopher himself harbored a lifetime of internalized torment. Raised in a strict Episcopalian household, he endured a cold, emotionally distant father and a perfectionist mother who demanded nothing short of excellence. As a child, William was mocked mercilessly for his stammer and bookishness, often excluded and humiliated in school. These traumas created a man who mastered the art of masking pain with a smile. After graduating from Wesleyan University, he struggled for years to break into the industry, often cast as the mild one, and rejected for leading roles due to his non-threatening appearance. He was nearly fired from MASH after clashing with producers over a storyline he found offensive to Catholic beliefs, a tension that never became public but left lasting bitterness. His quiet demeanor concealed a man who battled chronic depression and briefly turned to alcohol during the early years of raising his autistic son. While he and his wife later became advocates for autism awareness, insiders say their marriage suffered intensely behind the scenes, marred by isolation and emotional withdrawal. Christopher's biggest career disappointment came after the cancellation of After MASH, in which he reprised Mulcahy. He had quietly lobbied for a spin-off centered solely on the priest but was shut down, allegedly due to network discomfort over his growing activism. He passed away from non-small cell lung cancer on December 31st, 2016, in Pasadena, California, at age 84. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at $8 million, consisting mostly of MASH syndication royalties, modest real estate holdings in Pasadena, and earnings from his advocacy work. Kelly Nakahara was born on January 16, 1948, in Honolulu, Hawaii, and took on the role of lieutenant. Kelly Yamato in MASH in 1973 at the age of 25. Though her role began as background filler, Kelly's quiet persistence, on-set discipline, and disarming warmth transformed her into a fan favorite over a decade-long run. Her character stood out for bringing humanity to the chaotic war zone, often grounding emotional scenes with subtle grace. Audiences loved her for being the gentle, smiling soul in the background, but few knew how hard she had to fight just to be noticed. Kelly grew up in a strict Japanese-American household shadowed by trauma. Her parents were interned during World War II, and the cultural scars they passed down left her emotionally guarded and fiercely independent. She was bullied mercilessly in school for her appearance and accent, and she once admitted in a private interview that she spent most of her adolescence pretending to be mute in order to avoid ridicule. Hollywood wasn't kinder. She was told bluntly by agents that there's no place for a short Asian woman with a round face in leading roles. She was cut out of 3 TV pilots without warning and once accused a director of replacing her in a sitcom after she refused his advances. A scandal that was quietly settled out of court. Despite public appearances of serenity, Kelly struggled with depression in the late 80s, especially after the abrupt collapse of her acting career post-MASH, which she once called a slow, silent fade into invisibility. Though married to David Wallet and a mother of 2, their relationship was strained. Sources close to the family claimed long periods of estrangement, and one of her children allegedly left home at 17 after a heated confrontation. In her final decade, Kelly turned to watercolor painting full-time and sold pieces at local galleries while privately battling cancer for over 4 years without going public. She passed away on February 16, 2020, in Pasadena, California, at the age of 72 from cancer. At the time of her death, her estate included a modest Pasadena home, unsold artwork valued at nearly $200,000, and residuals from syndication, totaling an estimated net worth of $1.5 million. Harry Morgan, born April 10, 1915, in Detroit, Michigan, began portraying Colonel Sherman T. Potter in MASH in 1974 at age 59. Potter was the father figure of the 4077th, stern yet warm, with a no-nonsense style and a love for horses and home. Viewers adored him for his wit and wisdom, but Morgan's off-screen life painted a far more complicated picture. He grew up dirt poor in a broken home during the Great Depression, watching his father spiral into alcoholism after losing his job. These early scars bred a deep-seated rage. In real life, Morgan was known for his fierce temper, often intimidating writers and junior actors. His volatility peaked in 1996 when he was arrested for assaulting his wife, Barbara Bushman, in a drunken rage, a shocking scandal that was swiftly buried by Hollywood PR machines. Though charges were dropped after he completed a domestic violence program, the incident revealed a long history of rage issues, including a violent outburst on the dragnet set in the 60s that left a crew member hospitalized. Few knew that Morgan had a serious gambling problem throughout the 1950s, nearly bankrupting his family and prompting his first wife to file for separation. His career, though prolific, wasn't immune to failure. His 1972 courtroom drama. The DA flopped so spectacularly it was pulled mid-season, a humiliation he never forgot. His relationship with his 4 sons was strained. One of them, Christopher Morgan, died of a heroin overdose in the 1970s, a tragedy Harry never publicly addressed. He quietly blamed himself. Later in life, he retreated from the spotlight, living alone in a secluded Los Angeles estate. He died on December 7, 2011, at age 96 from pneumonia. At the time of his death, Morgan's net worth was estimated at $10 million, amassed from 6 decades of acting, early syndication deals, and silent investments in real estate and vintage cars. Larry Lynville, born September 29, 1939, in Ojai, California, took on the role of Major Frank Burns in MASH in 1972 at the age of 33. As the tightly wound, hypocritical, and painfully insecure military surgeon, Lynville crafted one of television's most memorable antagonists, equal parts comic relief and cautionary tale of blind obedience. But the actor behind the character was far more complex than audiences realized. Born into a deeply troubled family, Larry's early years were marked by emotional neglect. His father, a World War II veteran, was known for his silence and volatility, while his mother, prone to depressive episodes, frequently disappeared from the household for days. Larry was a shy, emotionally repressed child, bullied for his high-pitched voice and awkward demeanor. He found refuge in acting, a place to mask his insecurities behind the skin of other characters. His career, however, was a roller coaster. Though MASH brought him fame, his decision to leave the show in 1977, feeling the role of Frank Burns had been exhausted, would haunt him. Hollywood didn't reward his bold move. Casting directors typecast him, then gradually stopped calling. In the 1980s, he was fired from a TV pilot after reportedly clashing with producers over creative differences. Rumors of his perfectionism and passive-aggressive behavior followed him across sets. Behind the scenes, Lynville's personal life was no less chaotic. He married 5 times, each relationship ending in bitter divorce or quiet estrangement. One ex-wife publicly accused him of emotional manipulation and chronic jealousy. He had no children and was described by friends as brilliant but unable to connect. His final years were marred by health issues, including a battle with lung cancer that required multiple surgeries. On April 10, 2000, after a post-operative complication from cancer-related surgery, he died of pneumonia in New York City, alone in a hospital bed at the age of 60. At the time of his death, he left behind a modest estate, including a small apartment in Sherman Oaks, residuals from reruns, and a net worth of roughly $2 million. David Ogden Stiers was born on October 31, 1942, in Peoria, Illinois, and joined the cast of MASH in 1977, portraying Major Charles Emerson Winchester III at the age of 35. His character, a pompous yet brilliant Bostonian aristocrat, added a new dynamic to the show's ensemble. Less buffoonish than Frank Burns, more refined and calculating. Raised in a rigid Midwestern home, he struggled with severe social anxiety and repressed sexuality from a young age. His father, a traveling salesman, reportedly beat him for crying, and his mother dismissed his early interest in acting as effeminate nonsense. Throughout high school, he was socially ostracized and developed an isolated, bookish persona that would follow him for life. While he became a classically trained actor and a formidable stage presence, he was notoriously difficult to direct. Co-stars described him as cold and almost robotic, with some complaining that he refused to engage socially between scenes, insisting on strict solitude in his trailer. During MASH's filming, Stiers reportedly clashed bitterly with producers over the portrayal of his character, demanding rewrites and once threatening to walk off set if Winchester was made to appear emotionally weak. His greatest professional humiliation came in 1992 when he was publicly fired from a high-profile theatrical production in London due to artistic differences, a thinly veiled reference to his excessive perfectionism and rumored clashes with the British director. Personally, Stiers lived a life cloaked in secrecy. He never married, and though he came out as gay in 2009, it was decades after living in fear of industry backlash. He confessed in an interview that during his Disney voice acting years, he was terrified that coming out would ruin his career. Behind the scenes, he battled insomnia, an addiction to prescription sleeping pills, and later bladder cancer, which he kept private from all but a few close friends. He passed away on March 3, 2018, in Newport, Oregon, at the age of 75. At the time of his death, his estate included a multi-acre coastal property in Oregon, a vast collection of classical music recordings, and royalty income from Disney and MASH residuals. His net worth was estimated at around $8 million. Mlan Stevenson, born November 14, 1927, in Normal, Illinois, took on the role of Lieutenant Colum Henry Blake in MASH beginning in 1972 at the age of 45. He portrayed the affable but disorganized commanding officer of the 4077 until 1975. Henry Blake was known for his clumsy leadership, extramarital affairs, and fishing obsession, but fans adored him for his heart and vulnerability. His on-screen death in a plane crash remains one of television's most shocking moments. In contrast, Stevenson's own life was riddled with missed opportunities and deep regret. Raised in a privileged but emotionally sterile household, his grandfather founded a university, but love and emotional expression were scarce. Stevenson grew up desperately seeking approval, often through humor. His comedy masked a persistent inferiority complex that drove many of his professional missteps. After leaving MASH to pursue stardom, he headlined several shows: The Mlan Stevenson Show, In the Beginning, and Hello, Larry, each one flopping harder than the last. Industry insiders whispered that Stevenson was difficult to direct, often clashing with producers and bristling at Alan Alda's growing creative control. There were rumors of tension on set, with Stevenson growing increasingly bitter over Alda's centrality to the show. While no major scandals publicly erupted, multiple biographers have noted Stevenson's lifelong struggle with alcoholism, exacerbated by his disillusionment with fame. Personally, his life was equally messy. 2 marriages, both strained, and a rocky relationship with his daughter, actress Lindsay Stevenson. In his final years, he became increasingly reclusive, nursing resentments and haunted by the knowledge that he had left the role of a lifetime behind. Stevenson died of a heart attack on February 15, 1996 in Los Angeles, at the age of 68. He left behind an estate valued at approximately $6 million, earned mostly during his peak MASH years and through residuals, though friends say no amount of money could make up for the regret he carried to his grave. Johnny Hamer, born January 19, 1920, took on the role of Sergeant Zelmo Zale in MASH in 1974 at the age of 54. Zale, a supply sergeant with a razor-sharp tongue and a penchant for under-the-radar deals, was beloved by fans for his constant verbal fencing with Klinger and his everyman cynicism. But behind Hamer's comic veneer was a life haunted by instability. Born into a troubled immigrant household in Missouri, he grew up amidst financial despair and emotional neglect, often hiding in local libraries to escape his father's violent outbursts. Despite earning a drama degree from the University of Missouri, his career in Hollywood was riddled with rejection. He was allegedly fired from 2 early TV jobs for what producers described as a difficult temperament. While never criminally charged, rumors circulated of off-screen tirades and alcohol-fueled outbursts during his guest appearances. His biggest career failure came after being blacklisted from a high-profile sitcom in the early 70s, after a feud with a prominent showrunner turned physical backstage. Married to Helen Graff, their union was plagued by long separations and whispered affairs, one reportedly involving a much younger MASH crew member. Hamer battled undiagnosed depression, especially after the death of his brother in a car accident, and his cancer diagnosis in the late 80s arrived as both a shock and a release. He died on November 18, 1989, in Los Angeles, California, at 69. His estate included a modest Sherman Oaks home, minor residuals and memorabilia from his work, totaling a net worth of approximately $1 million, far less than his peers, a reflection of a career that had promise but never fully bloomed. Wayne Rogers, born April 7, 1933 in Birmingham, Alabama, made his debut as Captain Trapper John McIntyre in MASH in 1972 at the age of 39. As the charming, quick-witted, and devil-may-care partner to Hawkeye, Trapper was adored by fans. But off-screen, Rogers was quietly boiling. He clashed with producers almost from the beginning, accusing the show of turning into the Hawkeye Hour and resenting the creative favoritism shown to Alan Alda. He wasn't wrong. Alda was given script control, and Rogers' character was increasingly sidelined. After 3 seasons, Rogers walked away without warning. CBS sued him, but he shocked Hollywood by winning, because he had never actually signed the final contract. Wayne's childhood was equally dramatic. His mother suffered a mental breakdown after a stillbirth, and Rogers was sent to live with an uncle who allegedly beat him for crying. He grew up distrustful, fiercely independent, and quietly angry, a personality that clashed with Hollywood's collaborative norms. After MASH, Rogers reinvented himself as a financial mogul, appearing on Fox News as an economics commentator and investing in everything from real estate to medical technology. But behind the polished exterior lay a string of quietly buried scandals. In 1988, he was investigated for insider trading connected to a biotech firm he helped take public, though he was never charged. Whispers followed him for years. A volatile man, he was known to fire business partners on a whim and once physically attacked a journalist who questioned the ethics of his investments. His first marriage ended in bitter divorce. His ex-wife claimed he was emotionally abusive and obsessed with controlling her spending. His second marriage was more stable, though insiders reported years of separation and unspoken estrangement. He had 2 children, neither of whom spoke at his funeral. He died on December 31, 2015, in Los Angeles from complications of pneumonia at age 82. At the time of his death, his estate included 3 homes, numerous stock holdings, and controlling interest in several private companies. His net worth was estimated at $75 million. Roy Goldman, born March 1, 1932, in New York City, began portraying Corpsman Roy Goldman on MASH in 1973 at the age of 41. Though technically a background character, Goldman appeared in 37 episodes, his silent presence often grounding scenes of chaos and comedy with a sense of realism. His character never had a major storyline, yet his observant, dependable energy resonated with attentive fans. But behind that quiet exterior was a man who carried decades of emotional wounds. Raised in a poor Jewish neighborhood in Brooklyn, Goldman faced cruel anti-Semitic taunts from classmates and teachers alike. Those early traumas would shape him into a man who avoided conflict and attention, and who buried ambition behind humility. Though he began as a stand-up comic and did stints on shows like Hogan's Heroes, Goldman never achieved leading man status, something he reportedly resented deeply. Former castmates privately acknowledged that Goldman was often resentful on set, feeling invisible while others basked in fame. His darkest moment came during the production of Mel Brooks's To Be or Not to Be, 1983, in which he played Adolf Hitler. Though satirical, the role was controversial, and Goldman was accused by some Jewish advocacy groups of making light of the Holocaust, a charge he reportedly took to heart, retreating from acting not long afterward. He never married and reportedly had a long-term partner whose identity he kept secret, possibly due to fears of industry homophobia. His later years were marked by isolation, a modest pension, and quiet walks around Santa Monica. He suffered from chronic health issues, including untreated depression and advanced arthritis, yet refused help. On September 1, 2009, Roy Goldman died at the age of 77 in Santa Monica, California. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at just $500,000. He left behind no will, no public statement, and no family to speak of, only a modest Hollywood career and the whispers of a man who spent a lifetime just outside the spotlight. Alan Arbus, born on February 15, 1918, in New York City, joined MASH in 1973 as Major Sidney Friedman at age 55. His character, a dry, penetrating, and deeply humane psychiatrist, was a rare voice of reason in the madness of war, offering psychological clarity to the shell-shocked and the cynical alike. Audiences found him so believable that some genuinely thought he was a licensed therapist. But Arbus had walked a much darker path long before stepping onto that soundstage. In his earlier life, Alan and his wife Diane Arbus were a powerhouse photography duo in the 1950s, their lens capturing eerie fashion spreads for Vogue and Harper's Bazaar. Yet behind their chic images was a marriage unraveling at the seams. Diane, consumed by mental illness, fell into a spiral of depression, open affairs, and emotional manipulation that haunted Alan for decades. Their divorce in 1969 shattered him. Diane's suicide in 1971 devastated him further. Her body discovered alone in a bathtub after an overdose, leaving Alan racked with guilt, often believing his emotional absence drove her to it. This trauma bled into his portrayal of Friedman, whose empathy masked a quiet sorrow. Behind the scenes, Alan was known as intensely private, almost reclusive. He once confessed to co-star Mike Farrell that he still spoke to Diane's ghost when alone. His Hollywood transition wasn't smooth. He was frequently typecast as the Jewish intellectual and lost out on more than a dozen roles for being too cerebral or too odd. Despite being scandal-free, he was blacklisted by a major producer in 1976 after refusing to shave his beard, a symbolic gesture tied to his mourning. Alan Arbus died of congestive heart failure on April 19, 2013, in Los Angeles at the age of 95. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at $3 million, built modestly from decades of photography and recurring roles, including cult films like Coffee. Though respected, his true worth lay in a life lived on the emotional edge, always quietly haunted, always deeply human. Eileen Saki, born November 18, 1943, in Jerome, Arkansas, entered MASH history in 1976 at the age of 33, when she took on the recurring role of Rosie, the quick-witted and street-smart bar owner who became a 4077 staple. Her portrayal was different from the Rosies before her, sharp, soulful, and subtly subversive. But behind her iconic smirk and sarcasm was a woman shaped by displacement and disillusion. Born in a Japanese-American internment camp during World War II, Saki's earliest years were spent behind barbed wire, a legacy that followed her long after her family's release. Growing up in post-war Los Angeles, she was forced to smile through humiliation. Teachers mocking her yellow skin, neighbors accusing her parents of being enemy spies. In her teens, she turned to acting not for fame, but as a survival mechanism, creating personas that let her be seen in a world that wanted her invisible. Her climb in Hollywood was brutal. She was constantly typecast as waitresses, prostitutes, or Oriental girls, and once lost a recurring TV role after refusing to perform a slanted eyes gag written by a white showrunner. During MASH, she fought for dignity, not just for her character, but for herself. Co-stars recalled her quietly challenging jokes she found racist, only to be overruled by writers. Saki was known to burst into tears after particularly degrading rehearsals, yet she never stopped showing up. Off-set, her romantic life was complicated. She was briefly married in the late 70s to a theater producer, but the union fell apart amid rumors of infidelity and artistic rivalry. She never remarried and became estranged from parts of her family after choosing a life in show business. Privately, she battled cancer more than once, quietly enduring treatment between gigs. She passed away on May 1st, 2023, at the age of 79, after a final recurrence of pancreatic cancer. Judy Frell, born May 11, 1938, in the modest town of Quapaw, Oklahoma, joined MASH in 1976 at the age of 38, portraying Nurse Abel, a recurring background character who embodied silent strength and quiet compassion. Though she appeared in only 8 episodes, her presence added a sense of grounded normalcy amidst the show's frenzy. While audiences saw her as a calm figure in the chaos of war, few knew that behind her serene smile was a woman who endured far more personal drama than her role ever suggested. Born into a conservative, working-class family in the segregated South, Judy grew up in a deeply religious environment that discouraged women from seeking careers. Her passion for performance was constantly challenged by rigid family expectations. She pursued acting in secret, taking drama classes without telling her parents, and even financed her early theater work through night shifts and teaching jobs. Her professional path was constantly overshadowed by her then-husband, Mike Farrell, who played B.J. Honeycutt on MASH. The power imbalance in their marriage, though never publicly acknowledged, was well known in close circles. Judy quietly endured years of living in his shadow, even as her own talent was often overlooked. When their marriage ended in 1983, it wasn't the friendly split the press painted it to be. Friends described it as emotionally exhausting, with Judy allegedly battling depression and struggling to rebuild her sense of identity. After leaving acting, she poured herself into writing, but even that success was tempered. Though she wrote 13 episodes of Port Charles, she was never promoted to head writer, reportedly due to internal studio politics and favoritism toward male colleagues. Industry insiders whispered that Judy was too nice to play the game, often dismissed despite her skills. She lived modestly in Los Angeles, never remarrying, and was said to have grown increasingly reclusive in later years. On April 2, 2023, she died from complications following a stroke at age 84. At the time of her death, her net worth was estimated at $1.5 million, consisting of small residuals, modest real estate, and her earnings as a TV writer. John Orchard, born March 15, 1928, in Kennington, London, stepped into MASH in 1972 as Captain Ugly John Black at age 44. His role as the scruffy, sardonic Australian anesthesiologist brought an international, grounded flair to the show's early ensemble. With a laid-back demeanor and rugged charm, he quickly became a recognizable face, though always just out of the spotlight. But Orchard's real story was one of invisibility, disappointment, and battles with demons that never made the tabloids. Raised in post-war London amidst rationing and bombed-out neighborhoods, Orchard escaped a violent home. His alcoholic father reportedly beat him so badly at 11 that he suffered hearing damage in one ear. He fled to repertory theater, sleeping in dressing rooms and auditioning in broken shoes. Though trained at RADA, his career was defined by near misses. He was in talks for a leading role in Doctor Who, but lost it after an on-set meltdown during rehearsals, a panic attack mistaken for drunkenness. On MASH, he was never offered a long-term contract and was quietly written out by season 3. Bitterness set in, and he resented being remembered solely as Ugly John, despite reappearing in the show years later as an entirely different character. Off-camera, Orchard struggled with depression and had a long-standing addiction to painkillers, prescribed after a back injury on a low-budget film set in 1969. His marriage collapsed in the early 80s after he was caught having an affair with a production assistant half his age, a scandal hushed due to his fading status. In his later years, Orchard lived in quiet obscurity in Beckenham, Kent, reportedly surviving on modest BBC royalties and local stage work. He died on November 3, 1995, at age 66. The cause was never officially disclosed, though close friends cited liver complications tied to long-term pill use. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at just $500,000, a stark contrast to the legacy of the show he helped shape. Forgotten by the industry and plagued by personal regret, Orchard's story is a grim reminder of how quickly fame can vanish and how easily the background players of television history are lost to time. Richard Lee Sung, born August 14, 1930, in El Paso, Texas, joined MASH in 1974 at the age of 44, taking on a series of minor yet memorable roles across 11 episodes, often as Korean civilians, including the standout 2nd Korean Kim Luk. A Korean War veteran and former U.S. Marine, he wasn't just portraying war-torn characters, he had lived it. But behind his big laugh and bald head, Lee Sung carried the weight of a life shaped by battle, poverty, and survival. Raised in a deeply segregated Texas town, he endured open racism and violence as a child, often hiding in alleyways to avoid beatings from white gangs. After serving in the Marines, he drifted through odd jobs, dishwasher, janitor, even underground fight promoter, before finding his voice as a Chinatown bartender and eventually a stand-up comic. He built a reputation in Los Angeles not just for his raunchy, multilingual humor, but for his unfiltered, often self-deprecating material that targeted racial stereotypes in Hollywood. Though he called himself the sex symbol of Chinatown, the truth was more somber. He lived alone for most of his life, estranged from family after a bitter inheritance feud in the 1980s, and had no children. His acting career, though spirited, was hamstrung by brutal typecasting. He once revealed in an obscure interview that producers expected him to act like Hop Sing with a hangover. He reportedly walked off a sitcom set in the early 90s after being told to fake a chop suey accent. He was known in industry circles as someone who would confront directors who crossed the line, earning both admiration and blacklisting. In his later years, Lee Sung became a near-mythical figure in LA's Chinatown, still performing impromptu sets in back alley bars, often for drinks instead of money. He died on August 16, 2021, 2 days after his 91st birthday, of natural causes in Los Angeles. At the time of his death, his assets were modest: a rent-controlled apartment filled with decades of memorabilia, a dusty Marine uniform, and a few scattered comedy royalties. His net worth was estimated around $500,000, a fraction of what he might have earned had Hollywood made room for a bold, funny, and authentic Asian American voice who refused to play small. Thank you for watching as we reflected on the lives and legacies of the actors from MASH who are no longer with us. Their humor, charm, and unforgettable performances brought joy to millions and helped shape the show into a classic. While their journeys ended far too soon, their impact lives on through every scene, every laugh, and every memory they've left behind. As we honor their lives, we're reminded of how deeply television can touch our hearts. Join us next time as we look back at more stars who left us too soon, but whose stories continue to shine.